Well, we are in November, and I want to know what happened to the other 10 months. I just now started writing 23 on my checks. Right? It's going to be 24 very shortly. But it's Thanksgiving month, so we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving a bit, in a way, because what we're going to be talking about is the thieves of Thanksgiving. The day before Thanksgiving, an elderly man in Phoenix called his son in New York and said to him, "Son, I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough. We're sick of each other. And so call your sister in Chicago and tell her." Well, the son was frantic, and he called his older sister. And you know how, I'm going to be stereotypical for a minute, how women are. She exploded on the phone. She shouted, "They are not getting divorced. I'll take care of this." So she called Phoenix immediately and said to her father, "You are not getting divorced. Don't you do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back, and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" The old man got off the phone, turned to his wife and said, "Okay, honey, you got your wish. The kids are coming for Thanksgiving and are paying for their own flights." I've heard that many times, and I laugh every time I hear it. For most of us, Thanksgiving is about family. Sometimes it's a very happy and joyful time. Other times, maybe not so much. But it does bring to mind family either way. Some of my most cherished memories are of being at my grandmother's house during that time of the year, and it was time that I spent with Grandpa in the woods and with my uncle, because my dad didn't hunt. I'd go with them into the woods, and we would go hunting out for rabbits and stuff. We would come home around noon, or whenever Grandma yelled into the woods and said that the turkey dinner was waiting for us, and Grandma had taken that time all morning to prepare literally a Thanksgiving feast. But you know, Thanksgiving's not just a holiday that happens to be at the same time that Ohio's hunting season is. But Thanksgiving is the ability to give thanks to God. It is an essential spiritual attribute that's missing from many, many people today. I want to spend the next few weeks just looking at some things, talking about the thieves of Thanksgiving in our lives. And we're going to begin today by looking at the first thief, and that first thief is comparison. Comparison. Turning your Bibles to John chapter 21. And just grab a hold of that, because before we go there, I just want to paint this scene for you. Peter has rejected Jesus 3 times. And what happens after the third time? Cock-a-doodle-doo. He hears that rooster crow. And then shortly after that, we find that Jesus dies on the cross. And then he's buried. And then he resurrects. And after that resurrection, many people, hundreds of people, see him. But as we look at John 21, this is the first time that Jesus was able to be alone with his disciples. And he uses this time to restore Peter. Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" You see, Jesus knew that if he asked Peter 3 times if he loved him, it would cancel out in his human mind the 3 times that he denied him. We're going to begin in verse 18 of John chapter 21 this morning. Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young and used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted, but when you're old, you will stretch out your hands and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death was to glorify God. After saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and he saw the disciples whom Jesus loved following them, and one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Thieves of Thanksgiving. Not talking about somebody breaking in and stealing your turkey that you've got laying out, thawing for the next day. But folks, today and for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the devices that Satan will use to cause you to lose your focus. He'll take your eyes off of God. He'll put your eyes on things of this world and the problems in this life. Now, when I say comparison today, I'm speaking of looking to what you don't have, whether it be something, someone, or some situation. It's actually, let's look at it this way, it's focusing on the lack of something instead of being thankful for what you have. It's longing to enjoy someone else's blessings instead of looking at the blessings that God has given you. What causes this idea of comparison? Why do we compare? I think the first reason we see in our text today with Peter is inferiority. Inferiority. Peter in essence is a bully. Now, I use that term not so much in describing a guy or a girl in school that would push you around, but the big guy that we all know, the one that's very loud, the one that's very brash, and he wants everyone to know that he is the man. Steve Ferguson, junior year in high school. That's what I just described. Peter's that kind of man. You know, I was researching Peter and found several different definitions for his given name, Simon, and it depends on the language in which it was translated. Now, most of us sitting here today, we know that Peter means Petros. Petros is rock. We know that, okay? But I went further than that, because one of the Greek meanings of Simon is snub-nosed. Whoa! Ever heard that one? I dug deep to find that one. It means stubborn. Or in Aramaic, Simon or Cephas, in that language, could mean, I love this, cackling hyena. It's one who speaks rashly and without knowledge. Folks, I think I just described Peter to a T right there. Because you see, in a culture that Peter was living, people's names meant something. They were named for very specific reasons, and these meanings would have shaped their lives, and that's exactly what happened with Peter. You see, before Jesus called Peter to be a disciple, he was a brash, rough, cuss like a sailor fisherman. That's what he was. And once he became a disciple, he became the leader among the other 11 disciples. You remember when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter comes up with the right answer. "You're the Messiah, the Son of God," Peter said. Jesus is so thrilled that someone finally figured out who he was that he proclaims that because of Peter's confession of faith, he changed his name. He changed his name from snub-nosed, stubborn, cackling hyena to Rocky. Right? And that on that statement of faith and the heart with which Peter said it, Jesus said, "I'm going to build my church." Now, I'm going to tell you what happened that day. Peter's head went like this. Right? You ever having trouble when somebody just is talking about you and gloating on you and your head just starts to swell? That's what happened to Peter. He would not have been able to get through the door that day. See, this meant, when Jesus said that, this meant that he truly was the man. Right? He's thinking in his mind, you know, James and John, they can have their mommy try to get them places beside Jesus in the kingdom. I don't care about that, Because Jesus said, I'm the rock, right? I'm blessed. I'm the man. And then just a few hours later, oh my gosh, a few hours later, Jesus speaks of his dying for everyone's sin, and Peter decides that Rocky needs to take Jesus aside, set him down for a talk, and rebuke him for talking about dying. And I love this because Jesus then turns to him, and he calls him, and he says, Satan, get behind me. He went from the rock, the man, to Satan, get behind me. That is the Apostle Peter in a nutshell. Peter was a man that needed to be recognized. And those who suffer from this need are always deeply stuck with a sense of inferiority. You see, what happens at that time is we place our self-worth on how other people see and feel about us. And so what we begin to do is compare. All of us, listen to me, all of us have this at some level. Don't ever let people fool you. The people who say that they don't care what other people think are the ones that most deeply affected by the comparison problem. I was deeply affected when I was younger. Although it's much less than it used to be, it's still there. I still struggle. Early in our ministry, Joan and I were at our first church. It was called Calvary Christian Church, and it was in Schwartz Creek, Michigan. I was the associate pastor, and as such, I just got to preach once in a while. And back in that day, we still had the revivals. We would start on one Sunday, go clear through the week, and end on the next Sunday. And that's kind of how we did it. And we would bring in the more exciting preachers. And the more exciting they were, the more anointed they seemed to be. You know about those? I remember I was teaching in 1 Corinthians 13 on Wednesday nights, teaching through the love chapter, and I wanted us to see how much we could love one another. It was, I thought, very strong. Of course, I was very biblical with it. And I really thought it was a convicting series of lessons. Well, in the middle of my teaching lessons, I found out that the elders had scheduled a revival meeting with a fairly well-known evangelist who was somewhat famous within the churches that time. Some of you may know the name. George Stansberry. Anybody ever hear that name? He traveled this country for years, teaching, preaching revivals. And he came and he blew everybody away with his incredible teaching and all that energy. Man, was I blessed. But during his last service, I got to thinking, holy cow, next Sunday, I have to preach. And I'm nowhere near the level of George. I'm just going to be a major letdown to the people next week. So as he was leaving, I walked him out to his car. And I told him that I was really blessed by the ministry that he had. And then I jokingly said, thanks for making my job harder. I have to preach after you blew everyone away. His response was amazing. He said, you can't compare yourself to me. You haven't lived my life. You haven't had my experiences. You haven't experienced my failures. He said, I tried pastoring. 3 times, I tried pastoring. 3 times, I blew up the church. Until I realized that God didn't call me to pastor. I'm really bad at pastoring. So God called me to live on faith and to be an itinerant revival preacher. So he said to me, and grab it onto what God has told you to do. Trust what he has told you to do. Don't deviate 1 degree from the direction he's leading you, and you will live in his blessing. Probably the best advice I received in 40 years, and it happened in the 2nd year of my ministry. I don't think that advice is just for me and the ministry, though. I really believe that advice is excellent advice for each and every one of us. Wherever your life is taking you, remember this. God has called you to such a time as this and to such a place as this. Right now, right here. You and I are called to do something for the kingdom. Very frankly, some of us, we may have lost that vision that God has for us. But hear this, please. He hasn't forgotten you. As a matter of fact, right now, you just might be in training. You might be in preparation time. Because I know there are times when we feel like we're just walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Some of us may be there this morning. And you see all the light has gone out of my life. But yet, we need to remember the promises that God has given us. Romans 8:28, one of the greatest. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. You'll get there, I promise. As long as you don't short-circuit the process. The quickest way to kill the progress and the process is one word: comparison. You see, Peter hears that he's going to die like Jesus did. And so we got to remember that Peter saw the whipping. Peter witnessed the beating. He witnessed the humiliation, the torture that Christ went through. Peter saw the crucifixion. And all of that was on his mind when he immediately, when Jesus said that, well, what about him? Jesus said, what if I want him to live till I come back? You follow me. Bottom line today, it's not about the person sitting next to you. It's not about the Joneses, who are really hard to keep up with these days, because on the internet you can find any Jones you want. You follow Jesus. Because there are consequences to comparison. If you choose to compare yourself with others, you'll develop these consequences in your spirit, if not evident in your life. And the first thing is a lack of trust. Lack of trust. People who compare their lives with others are often people who desire the applause of others. Please God rather than pleasing man. This lack of trust, this comes because we get deep trust issues. It affects the way that we see God. Now, I'm speaking from some deep experience here, so please understand, I am right there with you. Peter, he didn't completely trust Jesus because Peter wanted and needed recognition. That need that exists within all of us is really a desire. Listen, when we have that need for that recognition, all that is a desire that we have, that we want to receive the worship that is only due to God. The desire for fame, another word for recognition, is the most poisonous thing a human soul can pursue. It's more addictive than any drug. It'll cause you to turn your back on God faster than any other sin that a human can be ensnared by. And it all starts with a lack of trust. A lack of trust in God's provision, a lack of trust in God's plan, a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. You see, folks, when you start comparing your life, your family, your possessions, your job, your church, your pastor, your spouse, your kids, your car, or whatever else you might treasure, when you compare that with someone else, you have started down the wrong road. HGTV is the absolute worst thing that has ever happened in this country. Joanna Gaines has decided that everyone needs to have this shiplap. She's decided that shiplap is a wonderful thing. It looks wonderful. You need to have it in your house. How many people you think have shiplap in their house right now because of Joanna Gaines? I want my house to look like that. Why can't we do that? I'm telling you, it's amazing because I sit there and I watch, not by choice, because I love my wife so much. And I just wonder at some of those shows, how many people who are watching become so jealous and envious because they can't have what the Gaines have. Comparison. We all get involved with it. And it begins with a lack of trust. And the next consequence, very simply, is the lack of understanding of ourselves. It's a lack of understanding that the gifts that God has given us. How many of you ever heard of Mark Driscoll? You heard of Mark Driscoll? He's a pastor. He's out in Seattle, Washington. He started with a church of 10 people in his living room. And then he grew to several thousands. Listen, in the city of Seattle. Did you know that Seattle has been voted the least Christian city in America? Worse than San Francisco, worse than New Orleans. That's hard to believe, isn't it? But God raised up Mark, a unique gift that was only given to work with in that time and in that place. If I were to compare myself to Mark, and I would try to imitate his gift here in Indianapolis, I think this church would probably be closed in about a month. More than that, I think I'd be run out of town. Here's the simple takeaway from this is fulfill your ministry with your gifts that you are given for this time, for this place, for this situation. And you do it for this outpost that we call Southport Heights Christian Church in Southport, Indiana. We need to understand ourselves and our gifts and live accordingly. Another consequence, very simply, comparison is the thief of joy. It's a thief of joy. You can't learn to be satisfied with what you have. You'll never be satisfied with what you're going to get. If you can't be satisfied right now with what you have, you will never be satisfied with what you're going to get. Satisfaction has nothing to do with what you have. Let me give you an example. You're 12 years old. How many of you can go back that far? Okay, think about your grandkids, your great-grandkids, whatever it may be. But think about a 12-year-old child. For months, they've been begging you for the toy that everyone else has or is getting for Christmas this year. So every time you walk with them into Walmart or Target or Meijer, they pull you over to the toy section and they just stare at that toy that they're convinced will fulfill their wildest dreams. Christmas comes. They open up their presents. And lo and behold, that gift is theirs. And they hug it. They play with it. They bring it with them in the car just because they don't want to take their eyes off of it. Then you got to fast forward a month. That toy is under their bed. It's laying there with all those mismatched socks that the dryer gets blamed for eating. They're begging for the next cool toy, and they're miserable until they get it. Do you believe today that that's only a condition that children have? Tell you what, with us as adults, it's just a lot more expensive. A woman is convinced that the married guy will bring her joy, and so she cheats on her husband because she is convinced that's going to make her complete. Or a man works 90 hours a week and has no time for family pursuing that promotion because he knows it will make him happy and complete when he gets it. Couple refuses to give to others in need, to charity, or even to the church because they need a new car, a better retirement, a bigger house, because that will make them feel fulfilled. Now, I said it was a lot more expensive because you don't find out the real cost until it's too late. Cost of broken marriage, children who now distrust authority, they're cynical toward marriage. Families that learn that they are second place to success in dad's career. Pursuing material gain will always lead you to want more. And you will never find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But yet you will run after it more and more and more and more. And it all started with a simple type of comparison. Do you know there is a cure for comparison? Simple cure. Are you ready for the answer? Are you ready for the answer? All right. Simple answer. Magnify God. Magnify God. How many of you ever used a pair of binoculars? Right? What is the job of the binoculars? To make things way out there look bigger up here. Right? That's what they're for. To make things that are far away look bigger. Magnifying God, listen to me, it does the same thing. It speaks of focusing on Him and Him become bigger in your life. Listen, there's a critical point in life that we need to understand. Too many people in this world today are focused on the pursuit of happiness. They even made a movie about it. The pursuit of happiness. But listen to me, happiness is a fleshly or earthly condition caused by circumstances in life that you find favorable. It's a matter of perception. My wife and I are very good examples of this. Her perception, HGTV, that's a happy time. It's those things outside the command that make us happy. It's the things that we find favorable. The problem is with pursuing happiness is that first and foremost, you and I are spiritual beings, not flesh and blood. Listen, our bodies are just vehicles. They house the spirit. What people are really craving is a spiritual gift of joy. Joy is a spiritual condition that only can be found in God. You know, all these things in life that we pursue to find joy, they'll never work because they're finite. They have an end. And joy is a spiritual condition that is infinite. And the only thing that can fulfill an infinite need is the infinite one that we call God. That's why we need to magnify God in our lives. To make Him the largest thing that we focus on. So that we can find that true joy, that true peace, that true fulfillment, that true satisfaction in this life that He's given us. Jesus told us this when He walked the earth in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be given to you as well. Make God the biggest thing in your life and He will blow you away with how much of those other things you think you need, because He's first. And when He's first, He knows He can trust you with the rest. There's another thing that we can do to help cure this comparison. Develop gratitude. Develop gratitude. Be thankful. As a matter of fact, you got homework this week. You ready for homework? Come on, groan like the fifth graders do. I don't want homework. Homework this week. Ready? Go home. Make a list. Make a list of all the things that you should be thankful for in your life. Now, let me tell you what needs to be number one on that list. Jesus. Jesus needs to be number one, because when you put Jesus number one, you just accomplished the first cure for comparison, and that is, when you put Jesus first, you're magnifying God. So put Jesus first. But then just make a list of things and hang it somewhere where you will see it often. Every time you see it. Every time you see it, you stop and thank God for something on that list. And you will be very surprised how your attitude changes and your mind and heart refocuses on what is right and what is true and what is pure. Magnify God. Develop gratitude. Now, I picked on Peter quite a bit today, but I'm going to do a Paul Harvey thing. How many of you remember Paul Harvey? And it's the rest of the story. With Peter, that's what we're going to do right now, the rest of the story. 2 Peter chapter 1, beginning in verse 13. Look at what Peter says. I think it is right, as long as I am in this body, to stir you up by way of reminder, since I know that the putting off of my body will be soon, as our Lord Jesus Christ made clear to me. And I will make every effort so that after my departure you may be able at any time to recall these things. Peter's close to death. You read that, you don't hear any fear of death, do you? You don't hear any fear of man's opinion. Because over those few years that Peter had between the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, and the end of his life, he had magnified God to such a degree, and he had developed such an attitude of gratitude to such a point that he could be at peace knowing that Jesus' words were very soon to come true. And tradition has it, Peter was crucified, but not like Jesus. Peter had grown so much in his life and his magnification of God that he did not want to be put to death the way that his Savior was. So Peter, tradition has it, was crucified upside down. Are you ready to be crucified upside down? Comparison is a sin that we very seldom ever think about. That we need to be like this. We need to be like that. We need to be better than them. They're better than us. We need to do this. We need to do that. Nah. Just like what Jesus said to Peter, follow me. Don't follow anybody you're sitting next to. Jesus said, follow me. Doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Jesus said, follow me. Are you ready to follow him today? Put on the blinders. You're not looking to the side. You're not looking to see who's following Jesus. You're just looking at Jesus. And we have, as the saying goes, we have one job. That's follow him.